Guess what? I'm Dave.
I'm Sean.
This is Barstools
and Bandtalk, the complete maritime music bucket list with their mugs. And we did a segment with this woman that was so popular. We had so much feedback on it. And we just had to have her on again. I mean, what we're finding with a lot of these folks, one time isn't enough. No. And got to bring them back.
So we will do that because we're like that. We have no problem bringing folks back who are popular, who you want to hear from, and who want to talk. And she's got a great story to tell. Welcome back, please, to Barstools and Bandtalk, Joan Kirby, our friend and mentor. There. There she
Hi, Joan.
Okay. All right.
You can see us and hear us?
I can.
Oh my God in heaven.
This is different than last time.
Last time she was, we should tell you that story. Last time she just had her eyes closed and she couldn't see anything. So she couldn't see either Sean and I. We all talked over each other. But this time she's got more of a story to tell. Sean and I are just going to shut up and let you go because, you know, I loved your court story, your courtroom story. That made me laugh right out loud. That was a great story, by the way.
You're like, it was true. That was fun. That was a good one. Actually, what I wanted to say is I told you after I did the last interview, we talked a lot about the bands that came in to the East Coast and when I thought it kind of changed, you know, the industry. However, we didn't get a chance to talk about the people that made it happen. It wasn't me, it wasn't Doug, it was everybody. And I, you know, felt that all of these people, I want you to know how they fitted into all this, because without them, it wouldn't have happened. And I think it's so important because you're interviewing some of these people right now. And I think it's great. Bruce Dixon, you just mentioned Bruce. I know Bruce since he was like a kid and he had a bass up like this playing under his chin. It was so weird to watch him play. I just don't remember that. I just want to mention, if you wouldn't mind, sort of, you know, when we booked a big band coming into the Maritimes, how many people it took to run that show and who the people were that I called. And they're all still there, and you know them all. And if we could do that, do you think that would be somewhere we could
names, my dear. It's all about name dropping here, Barstools and Bandtalk. We love name dropping.
Okay, well, first of all, basically, Doug would negotiate the band. He would, you know, call the agent or get an idea who was available. Once he locked that in, he turned it over to me. I would do the production. First person I went to Music Stop. I had to get equipment. I would take the rider over because it was all detailed. And at that time, Russ Brandon had a lot of musicians working for him. And so therefore, they all knew me. They all played at the Moon. They all knew. They were so helpful to me. I'm not a tech person. I don't know how a PA works. But I could say whether or not something, I could say to a band in the States, I can't get you this, but I can get you that. And know that at least it was compatible. Why, I couldn't tell you, but it didn't matter. But the guys at Music Stop helped so much. They were incredible, because without that, we couldn't have a show. Right. And then I would call Peter Hendrickson. Now, that's long before Tortec. Peter just had lights. And if I remember correctly, and if Peter reads this or listening, he looked like a blonde god. I mean, he was just this long blonde hair, and he was just gorgeous. And oh my God! But he would come and he would bring his lights in, and they were always so. He was always so good to me, always so accommodating. And the other person was Richard Bonner. Richard Bonner didn't have as many lights. He had Atlantic Illumination, which he still calls it that, I believe. He would bring in spotlights, and he would run the spotlight. Without those people, I couldn't have done the show. So I depended upon them just tremendously. And then we had the press people who I needed publicity. And one of these people were Lynn Horn, who was Lynn Fitzgerald. Kevin Head actually replied today and mentioned about Lynn Fitzgerald. Lynn was our publicity person before, you know, she did all kinds of stuff, and Marnie too, but Lynn did a lot of our stuff. And she was my best friend up until she passed just a few years ago, and I miss her every day. She was such a, she ended up managing Ron Hines. Um, she was just a wonderful person. We all miss her just terribly. Um, and then we had people that we would contact, depending on the act. We would need publicity. Some would need radio spots, maybe some wouldn't, but a lot of them did. So I would go to C100, Barry Horn, or Q104. Now Q104 came along a bit later, so C100 is where we started. And so Barry Horn would be at the, at the clubs quite often. But then when Q came along, Andy Kay, I don't know if you remember Andy Kay or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, he hung around with us because he was a good friend of Hazen's, and we all hung around together. And Andy would be there. And then Geordie Morgan, who was working for Much Music at the time. Well, now he's an MP, which is, I can't picture him as an MP, but I start researching him. I said, oh, I better be careful what I say. He's in politics now. But he was the Much Music VJ, and he was at the clubs all the time. And there was a girl who's still my friend. Her name is Peggy McDonald. She was the entertainment writer for the Halifax Herald, and she would come out and review the bands. And it was wonderful. Look, we just had these group of people that we could contact when we had a show coming in, and know that they would promote it and know that they would stand behind us. And then everybody came. You know what was really nice, but you can't do anywhere now, is that if I was bringing in anybody, I knew it would be sold out. We knew the show would be sold out. It was guaranteed sellout because everybody came.
Right.
It was like the big Halifax party, all these bands coming in. It was just, it was pretty incredible, actually. Hang on, I'm just going to grab a sheet here because hello, I did want to mention these people that were so important at the time. Those were sort of the main people that were around, but there are also all the agents. All the agents really were out there, and we all went to see each other's bands, and we would joke about it. And sometimes the bands would switch agents, and then they go back, and it was never nasty. I remember that one time, I don't know who said it. I think it was Andy Kay, said something about a feud between myself and Bruce Hudson. And so I called up Bruce. I said, hey, Bruce, I said, apparently we're feuding. And it was a joke to us, but it was just funny when we would meet, But it was just, as I said the other time, it was a small, big city. Everybody knew what was going on. And also, I like to talk about the sound techs.
Yep.
My God, Scrapper was probably the most well-known local guy. Like, Scrapper was wonderful. But there were a few other people. But I want to tell you a little story about a guy named Paul Benedict. Are you familiar with Paul?
Yeah.
Remember?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Paul Benedict was Ronnie Hawkins' sound man. And when Matt Minglewood was playing at the Misty Moon and he signed the RCA contract, my husband negotiated one of the biggest last settlements that a record company gave a band. Matt got it. With that, he bought a Midas Martin sound system from the UK, and it got shipped over. Again, I'm not a tech, but I can talk generally about it. That thing came over, and it was the most massive sound system anybody had ever seen. We took it into the Misty Moon. Matt sound man couldn't get it going. It sounded terrible. Somehow Doug remembered Paul Benedict, somehow called up Paul directly in Toronto. Paul flew down, and within it that night he got it. I mean, he was just an amazing guy. So we ended up taking him from Ronnie Hawkins to go on the road with Matt.
Wow.
Years later, when we started booking Ronnie Hawkins brought that up to Doug, and Doug felt terrible. To him, he was a hero. I mean, oh my God, we're booking Ronnie Hawkins, and that's the first thing he says, you stole my sound man. and we did, because he was just great. So there was that I remember quite well. There were other, Lee Stanley. Do you know Lee?
Yes.
Passed away. Yeah. Well, Lee, he was the road manager for Edgar Winter and Johnny Winter. That's when we first met him, and he came to the Misty Moon. He was great. He was so wonderful to deal with. And anyway, when Matt started, kind of touring, we needed somebody a tour manager. Man, we don't need a tour manager. Doug says, yeah, you do, and I know just the guy. So we convinced Lee Stanley to come to Halifax, and so he ended up being Matt's his tour manager, and that's how we got Lee. And he was just an amazing guy. The other thing is that I'm going to mention Bill Bootlier, because Bill Bootlier, my God, he's got tapes of every band that ever. Isn't that amazing what he's got?
Mhm.
I didn't even know that existed. Well, those existed until a few years ago. I had no idea. Every once in a while, I'll go in and just play and just remember it all. The recordings are amazing.
You'll put them up on that or SoundCloud. That SoundCloud application, you can put it on your phone too, and he can
Yes,
actually upload it to that program, and it's
yeah,
amazing. You're right.
yeah. He told me about that, so I'm actually going to do that. I usually just go on Facebook and find them. It's easier, but he's got
I'll call my girl Mary. She'll get you geared up. Don't you worry about a thing, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. And I must mention Peter Budge. Remember Peter Budge at all? Peter Budge was a CBS rep who lived in Halifax, and he was at every show. And I went to him to get Burton Cummings. I had booked I wanted Burton Cummings for the Fleet Club for a 10th anniversary, and I went to Peter because Burton had just been at the Metro Center. I said, I need him for a private party. And so I said, I need your help. And he was instrumental in getting Burton for me. So, I mean, all these people made a difference. Without them, we couldn't have done all this stuff. Bill Girdwood, do you know Bill?
I've seen his name though.
Bill Girdwood, he's from the East Coast, but he is a national tour manager and tech. He goes on the road with huge bands for large tours, and here in Ontario we used him for a lot of our shows, like the Canadian Tenors. Oh my God, I got a blank now of all the bands. David Clayton Thomas. He went on the road with all these bands, and he just bought a house in Mexico, and he commutes from there. It's cheaper than to do it from Halifax, Toronto. So yeah, and I'm still in touch. I'm still in touch with all these people. This is the wonderful thing about it. I'm just looking here now. Oh no, I got to mention Ed Levick.
Yeah.
Ed Levick has been there forever. He has been a supporter of everybody forever. And I have to tell you a little story about Charlie Acor. You know Charlie. We had our office in Toronto, and I get this call from Ed. He said, I'm on my way to Nashville. He said, I've got this kid. He said, he's fantastic. We'll drop by and say hello. And it was this kid, Charlie Acor. And they were driving down to Nashville to take part in this guitar contest. And they were camping going down. They had all the tents and everything in the back. I said, Ed, what are you doing? And because Ed always, I don't know, he always took somebody under his wing. And at that time it was Charlie, and I remember that very well. So that was fun. And he still does that. So he's great. I'm just going, and I have to, we could not have a conversation about Halifax without mentioning the Panagaea-Takis brothers and the Offmans. The Panagaea-Takis brothers, who are still running shows, as you know, I mean, I would get in Terry would say, come on, we're going for a drive. And we'd get in the car and we'd drive across the bridge, and he'd drive back and forth by the Matador to see what kind of a crowd Seymour had. Used to do that all the time. And it was scary because he would talk to you and not look ahead. He would talk to you like this all the way across the bridge, and I'm just panicking. But he would do that with everybody, all the agents, because we all go down, and he's, come on, go for a drive, and go across the bridge. And I thought, oh my God. And then he'd curse about this or that. He said, look at that. He said, I wanted that band. How come I didn't get them, or whatever? It was just crazy. And then Seymour would take you out to, what was the name of that restaurant on Quinpool Road that was open so late?
Oh,
open till 5 in the breakfast place.
Hoagies or Mary's.
Was it Mary's?
Mary's was 24 hours. There's Hoagies on. Hoagies
I
is
think
open till like 1 o'clock, I think, maybe. Or
no,
Freeman's.
no. This was the one that was open till like 5 o'clock in the morning because we would
Freeman's.
go down.
No, it was
Freeman's.
Mary's. It was Mary's.
It was, yeah, I believe it's Mary's.
Yeah,
Well,
Mary's Starbucks.
Seymour and Terry would be there at the same time, and the agents and the staffs. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. It was fun though. Also, there's a buyer I like to mention, Gord Spencer.
Hmm.
Gord Spencer, we first met him. He was the entertainment buyer for St. Mary's, but then he became the entertainment buyer for Network. And we did a lot of bookings with Gord, and I'm still in touch with Gord. I saw him 2 years ago, and we're still in touch. He's in the States right now, but doesn't matter. We're still all in touch. Also, all the agents, and there were several. There was there was an agent, Ron Bootlier. All these agents were partners of ours at one time or another. We all became partners with each other at one time or another. Some of them didn't last. Some of them lasted for a month. Other ones lasted for years. But there was Bill Bootlier. I'm sorry, Ron Bootlier. It was Bill's brother. He passed away, but he was our partner. Very kind man. I remember him so well. Marcel Cloutier, who was just a great guy, and Dwayne Coughlin, who's been there for a long time. Brooks and Fiona Diamond. They're really, really good friends of mine. We've been through so much together, Doug and I and Brooks and Fiona. We ran an office out of our house in Dartmouth, and they would come over every day. And Doug and Brooks were great friends, and they used to get lost in Newfoundland for 3 or 4 days. We would just lose them. Fiona and I didn't know where they were. We just said, well, they'll come back when they're ready. But they were great friends, and we did a lot of concerts together. We did a lot of stuff together, the four of us. So it was, and they've done so well. They've stayed in the Maritimes. They've done so much for the industry there. And I really, I saw Brooks 2 years ago. I met him at a bar in Toronto, and so we were talking. But anyway, I want to get to see them when I go down. Bob Dooley. Bob Dooley was a manager of McGinty for 10,000 years. Like he's McGinty. He's a great guy too. And then we had, of course, Hazen. Bruce Hudson. Bruce and I were friendly enemies. We really were. We saw each other at the bars all the time. I would go see his bands, and he said, "What are you doing here? Trying to steal my band?" I said, "No, I just came to see Tightener. I came to see Haywire. They're good bands. Come on, you know." So we were friendly enemies, and we became partners at one point. He was involved in Music Shop when we were Music Shop East. He was part of that. He was in our office. So it didn't last a whole lot time, if I remember correctly, but still. Joe Quinlan was an agent who worked for us. Not too many people know Joe, but he's up here. He's in Kitchener, I believe. He's not too far from here. And Skip York. Do you remember Skip York at all?
Yeah.
Do you remember? That might have been before your time. He was the first agent. He was really the first guy to start it all, Entertainment Contacts. We were still in St. John when we heard about him. And he's one of the first. We heard about this agent. There's an agent in Halifax. And we started booking each other's bands back and forth. This is the first time bands traveled at all. Okay. And one of the first bands we ever booked in New Brunswick from Nova Scotia was April Wine. I booked them for $400 at the Oromocto Arena. I remember that.
$400.
$400. $400. But you know, that's what bands made then. That was a lot of money. But
I think anyway. Bruce Wheaton talked about Skip York. That's I was trying to think where I heard the name before. I think Bruce Wheaton might have mentioned his name.
Oh yeah. Skip was the first. He and Hazen actually had an agency together, and then Doug and I joined them for a while out in Bedford. Like we had there were so many different little agencies that formed over the years. It's hard. I can't even put timelines on it because it's blurred. But I remember Hazen and Skip and Doug and I in an office. I remember in Bedford, and Skip was like Hazen, They were kind of two peas in a pod.
It's
Uh,
been a big pod.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
yeah, well, someone said, I think maybe you said he was, Hazen was the epitome of every agent that you get all the things that you could think of. So was Skip. Um, um,
Here's a question for you, Joan. Do you think that would that have worked well if you had you and Doug and Skip and Hazen and Dwayne and Elaine and Bruce and Marcel and all those guys? Had it been one big agency, would you have had more buying power? Do you think it would have worked better had it been one big agency?
no, 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 it was too much of a people thing. I think the bands gravitated towards who they wanted to be with. I think a large agency is really, it's too big. You don't have any personal contact that way. It doesn't work because they have them up here. I mean, Doug worked for Platinum Artist up here. They were huge. You kind of get lost in the shuffle. Down there, we never got lost in the shuffle. Everybody knew everybody. It was so different. And we kept telling people up here, you have no idea what the music business is really like. You go to the Maritimes. We're different. And we still are. And all the conferences were so much better in the Maritimes than they were anywhere else. And we maintained that right to the very end. They still are. It's a whole different mindset in the Maritimes than it is here or anywhere else.
Joan, it's funny you mention that because I lived in Toronto, but I moved back, and I've had the benefit of selling to people in Toronto and obviously growing here. And anybody that comes down from Toronto, I say exactly what you just said. We're different here. It's a very close-knit community. It's all about, and they all are kind of like, we sell in Toronto. And they come down here, and 9.5 times out of 10, they fail miserably because they don't get that connection people part of it.
Yeah.
No, they don't. They try to be slick. Slick doesn't work in the Maritimes at all.
Nope.
Maritimers defy demographics. You can look at numbers. Numbers don't lie. I get it. But when you look at it on a one-on-one basis, yeah, we defy those demographics without question. And we always have for any industry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I want to mention, I've been thinking about just sort of little stories and stuff. I got to tell you one of the best bookings I ever made, how it turned out to be the worst.
Okay.
And one of you guys, I think one of you mentioned you played at Portland Landing.
We both did, yeah.
Okay. I think it was Portland Landing. It's years ago. God, I can't remember. But it was a bar in Dartmouth. I'm sure it was Portland Landing. That was a pretty big place, right?
It was, yeah.
But was that quite a large club?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we were trying to get more clubs, to book bands, and I went over. I don't remember their names now. I'm sorry, but I went over and had a meeting with Portland Landing. I said, look, I can get your rock bands in here because they weren't getting anybody. Like there was nobody going. And I said, I can get you Oakley, I can get you Sam Moon. So I opened it with Oakley. The place was packed. I mean, it was just, I was just, I was ecstatic. And I was sitting, there was a dance floor right in front of the stage, but they had put tables there. And you couldn't get a beer. Nobody, like the waiters and waitresses were just run off their feet. And everybody was complaining about the service. And so then I put Sam Moon in, and Sam did the same thing. And I was all excited. I thought, this is just wonderful. I'm doing so good. So I went over and had a meeting, and I had, line up of bands I was going to put in there. And I said, the only problem is, I said, people are complaining about the service. He said, well, to be honest, we really don't want those bands anymore. I said, well, why not? He said, well, our staff can't handle that kind. We don't want that. We would rather have a half house so we can serve the beer. We're actually losing money. And I said, how is that possible? Their staff, he listened to the staff, and the staff didn't want the crowd. And I thought, and I walked out of there thinking, holy, I've never heard of that before. I did my job. I packed the place, twice in a row, and I get fired. That was kind of weird.
The fear of success sometimes gets the better of people.
I guess so. They had just been so used to, at that time, just older people would go there, have a beer, and they were just freaked out by it, all the people. So
you pretty much opened up for strippers there, Joan. That was our job. It was a strip club, so we kind of opened up for the strippers. So
was it really?
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. Uh, we didn't have the strippers too much. I just remember Hazen booking Lear, and she did the shower on stage. Do you remember? She had a part of her act was to take a shower on stage at the Misty Moon.
I love her.
Show. I didn't see that show. I would have remembered that show.
Yeah, that was a Hazen, thing. I also want to mention a place called Winnie's Lodge. Do you remember Winnie's Lodge at all? This may be before your time. Okay. Winnie's Lodge was a place where they would rent out rooms to bands. A lot of these band members stayed, that was their home. I mean, it wasn't just for a night. And Dutch Mason stayed there a lot. Sun Machine stayed there. And the problem is, the woman ran the place, knew all the agents because the agents would put bands in there. And she said, you have to make sure I get paid. So we would have to take money from the band and pay Winnie's Lodge because the band, we couldn't trust the band, just didn't have the money. So, we would, if we were doing the show, said, listen, we're going to take, $40, we got to give it to Winnie's Lodge. Like, she's going to kick you out. Okay. Those are the kind of things we ended up doing that not a manager's job, but it's not an agent's job either. No. It's just, we did what we had to do.
And you know what, Joan, that's a funny point. Now we're almost, you know what? I'm not afraid to bring you back for a part 3. I'm not afraid to do it. In fact, I would love to do it because you have so many stories and people love you, Joan. They do. They haven't forgotten what you or Doug, what you guys did at this part of the industry. They haven't forgotten you one bit. But you mentioned it, so if we're getting down to the wire, don't worry, we can bring you back. It's not a big deal. We love to do it, okay?
Okay, all right. Well,
so you said a story, I think there's a story about Dutchie Mason that you told me, maybe privately, that I think would be a funny story to share.
Oh, which one? The one about the bar tab?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we booked Dutch a lot, and all the clubs booked Dutch, And, he bounced back. He wasn't really with any one agent except later on, but we knew him so well. So anyway, we would book him at clubs. And then at the end of the week, the clubs would call and say, Jesus, they ran up a bar tab. It's like he owes us money. So when we booked, as time went on, certain clubs said he cannot run a tab because he's going to owe us money. And he did quite often, and you'd have to book they say, okay, well, we'll book him back there then so you can make your money back. That's the only way they'd make their money, is to book him again. Oh my God. They said, well, we can't do it with the tab this time or else we'll just be back in the same situation. That happened a lot. Now back then the bands could get, sometimes they got 24 beer a night or 12, depended who you are, or 50% off meals, 50% off, beer, never liquor. No liquor, just beer. But Dutchie was the only one that ever owed. And he did a lot. I have to tell you a little story about Rita McNeil. Because I was at the Misty Moon, and Buddy and the Boys were there, and Ralph Dillon, who was in Buddy and the Boys, and became Rita's musical director. I love Ralph. And he said, he invited us to come and hear this girl sing. He said, you got to come and hear this girl. He said, she's so special. This was on Kemp Road. So I went, and I was standing there, and all of a sudden I hear this voice. And I looked up at the stage and I couldn't see her. I said, well, Ralph, where is she? He said, well, she's really shy and she won't come out. She's behind the stage. She was in the wings. She sang the whole song in the wings. She wouldn't come out. And I said, but she's so unique. Oh my God, what a beautiful voice. Nobody saw her though. And everybody's looking around trying to figure out where this voice is coming from. And she actually was very shy, and Ralph actually over the years, and then Brooks Diamond managed her for a long time, but Ralph took care of her on the road because she always felt so insecure. But I remember hearing this voice and not seeing anybody, And
I was a rock guy, and I actually remember going to see Rita McNeil play, and it was in some little room in the Lord Nelson Hotel. And I just remember going like, holy friggin' crap, she was amazing. And
Her voice,
her stories just so.
no, her voice, she always sounded like bells. She sounded like bells when she sang. She was quite a nice person. Oh my gosh. Are you guys going to ask me questions? I'm rambling on
Hi,
here.
Carolyn. This is what we want you to do. We're 5 minutes. Well, actually, about 4 minutes in. So.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Joan.
Thank you.
So you know, and you're not rambling at all. You're giving some great info, and you get this big list of names, a big book of names. So something that's becoming apparent to me, what worked years ago is still very, relative now. Treating people the right way, forging relationships, communicating, and staying in touch with people so that, because you never know when you may need to draw on them.
That's right. But again, it still only happens in the Maritimes. I mean, we had our agency up here, and Doug and I are from the Maritimes and had sort of maritime ideas. And to be honest, we were at odds with the rest of our staff a lot because they didn't agree with us. They were so awful to people. They were rude to the musicians. They thought they were stupid and all. And Doug said, look, he said, we're representing these people. You do not change them. Ashley McIsaac, here's a good example. Ashley McIsaac, we were booking Ashley, and he's quite a character. And Doug said, if you book Ashley McIsaac, you know what you're going to get. We are not going to change him, and I am not going to change him. And he said to the agents, you treat him the way he is. You do not try to change him. And he said, I will never do that. I will never ask an artist to change him. He never did. But the other agents did. They wanted them to be this. They wanted them to be that. And we just never did. And as I say, we were at odds with our own agents a lot, I have to say.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Marcel, and actually Marcel still books my band, and he's still.
Oh, does he?
He lives like 5 minutes from my house, and but he's really adapted to the new way of doing things now. Everything's via email. You never see him. The first time I saw him in 2 years, I delivered some posters to him, and but doing great. But I will say, and when I say him, I'll tell him you said hi. I will say though, comfort as a musician to know that somebody's taking care of you. For me, good thing.
Yeah.
There was a common theme, Joan, and you touched on it right there. It's really hit me when you said it out loud again. It's because we all kind of listened to the same agents, and we all became the same band. The same song list, we looked the same way, had the same gear, had the same amount of light show, and it really didn't matter who was playing at the Moon or the Crazy Horse. It was the same thing. There's no uniqueness because we allowed ourselves to be changed because we just wanted to play. We didn't know there was another option.
Yeah.
They said, do this song list. You had to have X in excess songs and this many Def Leppard and Bon Jovi songs. Well, that was popular at the time, so you did all these songs. But it was the same list as the guy coming in next week. Why would you bother spending the money to go see us versus them? It's the same thing. So it's kind of
well, there was a whole big thing in the Maritimes. First of all, we used to have to send them set lists of what the bands were going to play.
Right.
Or if they wanted to know that before they were booked, a lot of times, and I thought, well, and we never wanted everybody to be the same. We kind of went out after and wanted people to be different. I didn't want cookie cutter groups. I never did. I wanted to book, if it was an Ashley McIsaac, nobody's like Ashley, nobody's like Matt, nobody's like Sam, nobody is like a lot of these bands. I haven't even hit on the bands. Good God, it's a whole other subject. The bands themselves were unique. I managed Grail, which was Kevin McMichael, Gary Stanhope, and Floyd King, and I was never so proud to represent a group in my entire life. They became so popular, but I remember booking them. I can't remember if it was I think it was the Matador. I was booking them in the Matador. He said, well, you have to add a fourth person. He said, I can't have a trio play here. He said, even if the guy doesn't plug in his guitar, make it look like he's playing. And I thought, that's what we were up against. Gary can tell you that. I remember that. And I thought, oh my God. And listen to these guys. I mean, and then Paul Ison came on board. And of course, Paul, and the first time I saw Paul, he was playing piano, and he had this thing in front of his face. And I said to Kevin, I said, what's he doing? He said, well, he's shy and he doesn't want to be seen. And he's had this thing in front of him on the piano. And I
Joan,
look at Paul now, amazing.
Joan, do me a favor.
Yes.
Will you please come back? I'm out of time again. Will you come back?
Okay. If you want me.
I
Oh,
promise.
yes.
We want you to come back. All right. Stay tuned for episode 3 with our good friend Joan Kirby, because she is awesome. Thank you so much, Joan, for
Thank
coming
you.
back on Bandstock, Barstools and Bandtalk.
Thank you.
Day.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate it. We're going to have you back.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.